What if none of this is real? You've certainly had the thought. Maybe you haven't said it out loud. I mean, it could have come to you at 2 a.m. when you couldn't sleep, when something painful happened in your life and God just felt silent. Or maybe somebody asked you a question about your faith. You went to answer and just nothing came out. And the worst part is that usually we feel guilty for even having these thoughts. Somewhere along the way, we've picked up that having doubts means that you're losing your faith. If you're really following Jesus, you wouldn't be asking these questions, that good Christians don't go there. But what I want to show you today is that the Bible is full of people who have doubted. And I mean, not just regular people. I guess we're all regular people in the end, but the people who built this faith, the one that we name our kids after. And God didn't punish them for it. He met them in it. So today we're going to talk about what doubt is, what it isn't, and how doubting and asking these real questions might actually be where your real faith begins. Sound good? Get into it. I want to walk you through 4 people in Scripture who doubted. And these 4 people doubted in different ways. So I hope that at least one of them can feel pretty familiar to you. The first one is Jacob. And Jacob does not doubt quietly. He literally wrestles with God all night. In the book of Genesis, chapter 32, it says this. This left Jacob all alone in the camp, and a man came and wrestled with him until the dawn began to break. I enjoy this story a lot because God could have ended the fight at any point, right? But he doesn't. He lets Jacob hold on. He lets him struggle. And when the fight is over, he blesses him. He gives him a new name, Israel. This is the name of an entire nation, the name that nation still carries today, and it literally means one who wrestles with God. That's God's people, the ones who wrestle with him. Think about that. The people of God are named after a man who fought with him. Not someone who had it all figured out, not someone who never questioned, but a man who grabbed hold and refused to let go until he got something real, and then he walked away blessed. Next is Job, and Job doesn't whisper his doubts. He screams them out. In Job 3:1, he curses the day he was born. He calls God unjust, and he demands an audience with God, and he is not polite about it. Job's friends, the religious ones, tell him to be quiet, saying that he must have done something wrong. He needs to accept it. He needs to stop questioning. Does that sound familiar? If it is, I'm sorry, but this is true and it happens a lot. People who are religious will just tell you to be quiet, to not question. You just need to trust more. You just need to believe. But here's what God says at the end of the book of Job. He turns to his friends after Job has done all of his raw, unfiltered, messy grief, and he says this in Job 42. After the Lord had finished speaking to Job, he said to Eliphaz the Temanite, I am angry with you and your 2 friends, for you have not spoken accurately about me, as my servant Job has. The friends who defended God with these tidy answers got it wrong, and Job, who demanded answers and screamed at God, he got it right. God honors the honest cry, not the polished defenses. Now I want to talk about Thomas, and you may have heard this story, but I want you to stay with me because a lot of times I feel like we give this a negative connotation. Thomas, one of the disciples, wasn't actually with the group of disciples when Jesus appeared to them after the resurrection. And when they tell him about it, he says this in John 20. I won't believe it unless I see the nail wounds in his hands, put my fingers into them, and place my hand into the wound in his side. We've turned Thomas into the villain of this story. Doubting Thomas, we call him, like it's a cautionary tale. But Jesus, a week later, appears and specifically goes to Thomas. And he doesn't just say, you should have trusted more. He says, put your finger here, see my hands. Put your hand into the wound at my side. Jesus showed up specifically to the doubter. He didn't wait for Thomas to get his act together. He met him in that doubt. This next one is about an unnamed father in the book of Mark, chapter 9. The father brings his sick son to Jesus in desperation, and Jesus says, everything is possible for one who believes. And then the father cries out in Mark 9:24, I do believe, but help me overcome my unbelief. That's not a confident prayer, is it? I mean, this man is holding 2 things at once, his faith and his doubt in tension, like so many things we have to do as Christians. But he brings them both to Jesus. He's not pretending, he's being truthful, he's being honest. And then Jesus heals his son. He doesn't wait for this man to overcome his doubt and get through it. He works through his doubt. Now, while I was looking over all these stories of these doubters, I had a question pop into my head that some of you might also have. And it's because the Bible says, do not put the Lord your God to the test, right? I mean, in Matthew chapter 4, when Jesus is being tempted by Satan, Satan tells him to jump off of this high place because God's angels will save him. They won't let him be hurt. But then Jesus quotes Deuteronomy and says, do not put the Lord your God to the test. So I want to look at the difference between doubt and testing God because I think there's a fine line there, and some of us might get it wrong. Testing God, what the Bible prohibits, is demanding that God perform on your terms before you will obey him. It's the same posture of the Israelites when they were at Massa in the Exodus. They had seen miracle after miracle. God parted the Red Seas for them. He brought down manna from heaven to feed them. But they still said, prove it again or we won't move. It's using doubt as a weapon. It's very similar to emotional blackmail, where somebody says, you don't love me unless you do this for me. It's using that important thing against them. Treating God like a vending machine, where if you give out the right prayer, you're expecting to get the right result, and then you will believe. Honest doubt, what the Bible is full of, is bringing your real questions, your real pain, your real confusion to God, not away from Him. It's Jacob grabbing hold and saying, I will not let go until I understand. It is Job screaming into the void, but screaming at God. It's Thomas saying that he needs more, but deciding to stay in the room. The difference here is posture and direction. Testing God is a closed fist while you're pulling away, but honest doubt is an open hand while moving toward God. The question is not whether you have doubts, friends. It's what you choose to do with those doubts. If any of this is resonating, please hit that like button down below. It helps the channel out a lot, and it tells me you guys want to see more content like this. All right? Thank you. This isn't just a biblical pattern. The people throughout history who have thought the most about faith have said the same thing over and over again. Doubt is not the enemy of our Christian faith. Avoided doubt is. Eugene Peterson, the person who wrote the Message translation of the Bible, was a pastor and a writer for decades, and he has this to say about doubt. The reason many of us do not ardently believe in the gospel is that we have never given it a rigorous testing, thrown our hard questions at it, faced it with our most prickly doubts. That's almost counterintuitive, right? I mean, so much of being a Christian is counterintuitive. The reason your faith might feel weak is not because you feel like you're doubting too much, but maybe you haven't doubted enough. There are questions that you've left on the table, that you've left buried deep inside because you don't want people to hear that you have them. But rigorously testing, being honest about your doubts and bringing them to God is how you strengthen. Tim Keller, another writer who wrote a book called The Reason for God, puts it this way. A faith without some doubts is like a human body without any antibodies. People who blithely go through life too busy or indifferent to ask hard questions about why they believe as they do will find themselves defenseless against either the experience of tragedy or the probing questions of a smart skeptic. I know that's something I'm afraid of. A smart skeptic coming to me and asking a question that I can't answer. The solution to that is asking those questions yourself first, digging deep with your faith and finding those answers. Further on in his book, Tim Keller says that in fairness, you must doubt your doubts. And I think this is really important to think about. Because here's the thing, your doubts have assumptions underneath of them too, just like your faith may at some point if you haven't asked those questions yet. And if you're going to be intellectually honest, you need to give the same scrutiny to your skepticism that you are giving to your faith. Doubt your doubts as rigorously and as honestly as you are doubting your beliefs. And lastly, another writer and theologian named Frederick Buechner gives us a metaphor for what doubt is that I think can be really helpful. Doubts are the ants in the pants of faith. They keep it awake and moving. I love that analogy because your faith is something that is alive, that is moving. And a faith that has no doubts is not a faith that's awake, that is doing good things. It's a faith that is sleeping. Now, this is the part that I really want you to hear because it's something that I'm trying to do, and it's what I would tell people to do if they are trying to find Jesus. If a person came to me and was like, hey, you have this really strong Christian faith, and I want to have the same thing, how do I start down that path? I wouldn't tell them to go read the Bible. I wouldn't tell them to go to church. I would tell them to search for truth. Go out and search, read everything, ask the hard questions, study other religions, not to dismiss them, but to truly understand them. Read about people who have tried to disprove Christianity and what they have found. Grill the people who believe it. Don't accept easy answers. Just search for the truth rigorously and honestly with your whole mind. Because Jesus didn't say, I am a good option. I am one path among many. In John 14:6, Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. If that claim is true, then truth seeking and Jesus finding are the same journey. You don't have to start with faith. You can start with your questions. The claim of Christianity is that if you ask these questions and you follow them honestly and without flinching, you will end up somewhere true. And I'm not the first person to say this. Some of the most intellectually rigorous, skeptical people in the world did exactly this, and they ended up somewhere they did not expect. C.S. Lewis, someone that I bring up a lot here, called himself a hard-boiled atheist. He was an Oxford professor, a brilliant guy, and he spent years trying to hold his atheism together intellectually, and he found that he couldn't. A turning point for him came in 1931 when he had a conversation with J.R.R. Tolkien, the one who wrote The Lord of the Rings. He was telling Lewis that the story of Jesus wasn't just like one of the myths that he loves to read. It was the only one that is actually true. And Lewis really thought about this. I mean, he went to bed an atheist, he said, and he woke up a Christian. And here's how he described it in his autobiography, Surprised by Joy, which I challenge you to go and read. I gave in and admitted that God was God and knelt and prayed. Perhaps that night, the most dejected and reluctant convert in all England. He wasn't looking for comfort, and he didn't grow up in a warm church community, honestly, like I did. He followed the argument, and the argument brought him somewhere that he did not expect. Then there's Lee Strobel, a Yale-educated legal journalist at the Chicago Tribune. He was a committed atheist, and then his wife converted to Christianity. But he set out to disprove that. He spent nearly 2 years of his life using his investigative journalism skills to test the historical claims of the Bible. He was interviewing scholars, he was examining evidence of the resurrection, and testing the reliability of a lot of New Testament documents. And then in 1981, after all of his research, his conclusion was that the evidence was too strong to ignore, and he accepted Jesus. What makes Strobel's story so powerful is his method. He didn't start with faith, he started with questions and skepticism. Honestly, more than skepticism, he set out to disprove Christianity as a whole. And he had this amazing legal framework for evaluating evidence that he used as an investigative journalist. He followed the questions, and at the end of those questions, he found Jesus. He wrote a book about all this called The Case for Christ. I would highly recommend it. If you're in a season of doubt right now, give it a shot. See if it helps out. And I'm not telling you these stories because I'm saying smart people believe this, so you should too. It's telling you that they asked questions and they didn't stop. They followed the questions further than most people are willing to, and they found something true on the other side. Maybe you've been carrying a question that you have been afraid to say out loud. Maybe you feel like your doubt disqualifies you, or maybe on Sunday you've been performing a certainty in your faith that you're not actually holding right now. You know, you're just nodding along, saying the right things when something inside you is still screaming, is any of this real? I want you to go back to that father from Mark chapter 9. Lord, I believe. Help me overcome my unbelief. The man didn't have it figured out. He was holding both faith and doubt in the same sentence, and he brought it straight to Jesus. He didn't clean himself up first. He didn't resolve the tension that he was feeling. He just came to Jesus as he was, seeking that truth. Jesus didn't wait for him to get it together. He moved. God is not threatened by your questions. He's not waiting for you to have it all figured out before he's going to show up. Jacob wrestled with him. Job screamed at him. Thomas had to see the wounds, and this father was in the dirt, praying, half in doubt. But God met every single one of them. So bring him your questions, bring him your anger, bring him all of your I don't knows, bring him the doubts that you have been too afraid to say out loud. He can handle them. He's been handling it for a lot longer than any of us have been around. And maybe that is where your real faith will begin to come true. Amen. Thank you all so much for staying with me to the end of the video. If you enjoyed this, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel so you can see when more videos come out, and comment down below if there's a doubt that you've been holding on to and have been afraid to voice. I know I have doubts as well. I still doubt whether or not I feel like prayer works. And I just made a whole series of videos on why prayer works. I believe it does, but I still have some shreds of unbelief, and I need help getting through that. I would love for you to share down below if you have any doubts, and we can encourage each other through it. All right? I love you all. See you in the next one. Peace.